jeez. Oh, gosh. Oh, man. It's the story of my life. Being a quote-unquote leader sounds like a pretty swell thing to a lot of people. You get to be a driving force, an inspiration to many people. But not everyone's got the potential to be a leader, right?
Wrong!
You don't have to be born into leadership, be a brainiac, or be Macho Man Randy Savage. It'd help, but you don't need it. You could be a scrawny, average-level intelligence kid obsessed with video games. Me, in case you were wondering, and you still have more than what it takes to become a leader. But, like any skill, being a leader is something you learn. But there is no leadership for dummies, at least to my knowledge. If there is, well, I guess look where the real dummy is, huh? You learn leadership through experiences and the people you meet in your life. The people who really shape you for the future. And behind the life of every leader, there is a story. This is a story of how I became the little leader I am today. I was born in Centerline, Michigan, and lived with my mother, my older brother Jeremy, my uncle Todd, and my grandmother. Mother Dearest was a strong, independent woman who didn't need no man, especially seeing that her father was a total weenie. Mammy really was the pants of the family, seeing that we liked Dad as much as Antigone likes King, I don't know, something with a C? King Carpal Tunnel. Good old Daddy-O. Probably one of the biggest losers I've ever met. We used to go over to our grandfather's house from time to time, and he'd be there, but that didn't go on for long. He's in jail most of the time for not paying child support, so that sucks for that guy. Anyway, back to good family times. My brother Jeremy is my main squeeze, even though back then we used to get on each other's nerves more times than I could count. Seriously, I only had like 10 fingers, and it was like way more than that. And to be honest, my memories of Todd and Grandma are kind of a blur from back then, but I imagine they're not much different than how they are now. They were nice, that much I can clarify. Huh, almost forgot to mention we also had two adorable little canine companions, Cinder and Daisy. Daisy's original name was Ella, so they'd make Cinderella, get it? But that just sounded silly, so she's Daisy now. In terms of schooling, I went to an elementary named Peck, home of the Peck Pirates. Yarr. I did go to kindergarten, but I can't for the life of me tell you what it was called or who my teacher was or anything of that sort. All I really remember was that I rode the Penguin bus, but I remember a bit more from Peck, so let's talk about that. I really didn't like school back then. Like, at all. I hated it. It was incredibly difficult for me a majority of the time, whether it was the subject was too hard or I just felt like being a bad kid. I would much rather be home playing video games than learning the capital of Kentuckers or some elementary level learning curriculum of that sort. I didn't have a whole plethora of friends while I was there either. Wasn't a very sociable kid. The only pal I could count on was Jeremy, but he was 3 grades ahead of me, so we never really got to see each other in school. Occasionally we get scrambled lunches and we go out to recess together, but that was every once in a blue moon. I stayed there for a few years, up until halfway through 4th grade. Then things got a little out of hand. My grandmother and my mother had a bit of a falling out. I can't for the life of me remember what it was about. I just remember yelling and the police came and I was sitting out in the garage with Jeremy crying and it was just a mess. At that point we were pretty much kicked out of the house. Well, I thought it was all going downhill from there. But we had a silver lining. Mother was in a relationship with a good old guy named Kevin who let us stay with him. Kevin was a real cool dude. He spent a lot of his time working on his cars and such, and he lived in Shelby Township, which is like a skip and a hop away from Centerline. It's pretty far, but it's not that far. He essentially became a sort of father figure for me and Jeremy. He wasn't a let's go outside and play some catch perfect movie daddy-o, but he was a swell guy. The whole process of switching schools was a real pain in the tuchus, seeing that I couldn't just switch immediately, so I had to be driven all the way back to Centerline every day for school for a bit of 4th grade. After that was done, whatever friends I had at Peck were all but a memory. Having to make new friends was probably my biggest fear when I went to my new elementary, Roberts. The first day I was there, I could tell things were going to be much different from my past school experiences. For instance, instead of only going up to elementary up to 5th grade, at Roberts, it actually went up to 6th grade. At that point, I was like, hell yeah, 1 more year of recess. And as it turned out, making more friends wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I think it was about 5th grade when I got acquainted with my 2 best pals there, Cody and Nolan. Nolan was a spirited young lad with a lot of energy. I used to go over his house quite a bit, seeing that my mother didn't like him being over our house since he was so rambunctious. And Cody. Cody was my absolute best friend while I was there. I'd be over at his house whenever possible. Some good times were had, me and Cody. Cody was a great friend. He's probably the reason I was able to tolerate school, and heck, he was probably why I started enjoying school. Things were going pretty well for a time, but in 5th grade, something interesting happened. Apparently, the teachers and such had been keeping a close eye on me. With all the weird little quirks and social awkwardness I had, they started to put some pieces together. One day, they called me and Mama into the main office. It was then that I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism. At that point, I didn't really know what that meant, but when I started receiving extra help in school, I was thinking to myself, hell yeah, this autism thing is awesome. I was a mere little tyke then, so I didn't really have a grip on the whole subject yet. In fact, I still don't. People ask me what having Asperger's is like all the time, and it's not something I can really explain. It's just who I am, really. But yeah, school started going a bit better for me with the extra help, and life was just dandy. When I got into the 6th grade, that's when another stage of my life began. This was when I was first introduced to drawing and making comics. Jeremy at this point was already a pretty good artist and wrote many comic books. I occasionally made little doodle comics because I saw him doing it, but I never really did anything major with it. It was in 6th grade when I first decided, I'm gonna make a whole book. My brother had this idea to make a silly story about a talking hot dog in a bar of soap, but then I guess I liked the idea so much that I wanted to do it instead, so he gave it to me. So I began writing in a 70-page lined notebook my very first comic, Hot Dog and Soap. Creative title, right? I still have that notebook to this day. I love to look back at my crude stick-figure drawings and dry sense of humor. Shortly after I finished Hot Dog and Soap, I immediately began work on its sequel, Hot Dog and Soap 2. Where the drawing gets slightly better and some jokes are actually funny. It was scheduled for a 3rd book to be done as the conclusion to the series, but that comes in later, because there's some stuff to say about that. 7th grade started another half unfortunate but half fortunate part of my life. When it came time to move on to middle school, I had a choice to make. I could continue on with standard schooling, but my mother gave me another option. I could instead go to a middle school named Davis, home of the Raiders. Pirates seem to follow me wherever I go. Anyway, Davis was starting a program to help kids with special needs like myself. Seeing that I was struggling in school, I eventually made the choice and decided to go to Davis. Once again, I had to leave my friends and start my social life anew. I haven't heard from Cody, Nolan, or any of my friends from Roberts since. When I got into Davis, it was a whole nother ball game. My first hour was social skills, which is my special needs homeroom in a way. My teacher's name was Mrs. Mize, probably one of the nicest teachers I've ever had. She was so fun to be around, always so cheery, and she had the biggest obsession with frogs. Seriously, her whole room was like covered with them. I feel so bad for not remembering all the parapros names, the people who came to each of our classes to help us out. I love them all the same though. Our class was quite small, seeing that we were the startup group, so we were all 7th graders. Slowly, I started to pick up people I could consider friends, John Sabella being the first. John was very tall and, hairy for his age. He was a bit more awkward than me socially, so his mother and my mother were very happy that we started to get along. For a while, my best friend there was Jacob. He was a cool kid, but a bit misbehaved. He got expelled from the school somewhere in the 8th grade for making something in woodshop that launches pencils or something, I don't remember. Definitely wasn't safe though. My other friend, a slightly better behaved child but nothing worth of a standing ovation, was Mitch Perez. He used to be a bit of a bully to me actually, but when I introduced him into the world of playing with silly stuffed animals, he strangely came right around. As time went on, I could tell middle school was gonna be a blast. And indeed it was, because things just kept getting better and better. When I got into the 8th grade, the new 7th graders came to the class. That's when I met Joshua Plum. Never really thought much of the kid, until we got paired up for an assignment together, and for some god knows reason, we became best pals because of it. I started going over to his house a lot on the weekends. He had a passion for making YouTube videos, and he ended up getting me into it as well. Whether it's at school, at his house, or over the phone, we collaborate and strategize the best possible videos. At least by our standards. But hey, we were just kids, right? Man, every time I went over there, we'd make a brand spanking new video. From game reviews to silly sketches about being homeschooled, celebrating Christmas, and other silly pish-posh wingdings. Middle school was also a very special time for me in the drawing aspect. I sometimes drew stuff at school or brought the original Hot Dog and Soap and Hot Dog and Soap 2. And what amazed me was that people actually started complimenting me and my drawings. I couldn't believe it, honestly. I never really showed my drawings to anyone, and I started to receive such a good reception from them. One interesting thing to mention is that in 9th grade, a 7th grader named Ryan Breyer came into the program. He became the ultimate center of drawing attention. His drawings weren't top-tier artist mumbo-jumbo, but he was better than me at the time. In my situation, I had a few people who knew I liked to draw and such, and the whole school practically knew about Ryan. Was I jealous? Surprisingly, no. That's when I realized something new about me. I don't care. I just flat out don't care. That's honestly what's gotten me through life. I have this fantastical ability to not let things get to me, especially if someone's better than me at something. It makes it hard to sympathize with friends who really can't let things slide like I can, but I manage. Most of the time. But you know, all the friends I've made in school, all the experiences I've had in school, nothing compares to the influence the next part had on my life. This is the part where I was introduced to the PlayStation 3. Now, I know some people are thinking, how video games influenced your life? But trust me, it's a lot more important than it seems. We bought furniture during a where the furniture came with the PlayStation 3 console. And the first game we got with it was a game called The Orange Box, a collection of different games, but the most important being Team Fortress 2, an objective-based first-person shooter pitting the red team against the blue team. It was my first time playing a game like it online with other people, so it was really scary, but exciting. I met a few people who ended up in the same game as me quite often, so we added each other's online friends. I never really talked to any of them, but there was one friend I added named Janky11 who comes into play later in a big way. The second game that I got for Christmas that year was a game called Little Big Planet. It's a game purely about creating stuff. Want to make a robot? Go ahead. Want to make a robot car? Be my guest. Want to make a robot car with obnoxious amounts of guns that shoot bananas and turn to shoot smaller bananas that explode? The sky's the limit, and you decide where the sky is. There is no game that I've ever played that's influenced me as much as Little Big Planet has, and that's not just on an artistic standpoint. The PlayStation controller in my little cardboard spaceship was my gateway to the world. Playing creations from other states, Japan, France, Russia, it was amazing! Hit the dive in button and join some random players and make some new friends. And boy, I made a lot of friends. PRDT4, RT Angel 2010, I'm Better Than You, which is kind of funny because I actually hate that guy's guts now, but the list goes on and on. I used to want to stay up all night talking with them, building with them, playing other people's creations with them. Little Big Planet became my life outside of life. I really loved creating and making little adventures. I never really got popular or anything on the online, but heck, that didn't matter to me. Just the fact that I made the thing was good enough for me. One thing to know from Little Big Planet is a costume I made, a Cyclops with a scraggly beard. Now, it's just a costume in a video game, but this plays a big part later on. I really feel the need to mention big things that are happening later on in the presentation, don't I? Don't worry, I'll catch up to all of them eventually. Eventually, the way the tide of games turned, and with what my brother would play when he went out, we eventually got into the iconic first-person shooters of our generation, notably the Call of Duty series. It's simple. Get your gun, shooty shoot, win first. The one we started with was titled Modern Warfare 2, filled with modern shoots and bangs, pow-pow. I played it a lot. I usually tried to get a game in before school every morning. But it didn't really affect me at all on a more personal level. That is, until I got a message from someone I had long since forgotten. Sorry about that, I'm drinking a Pepsi. Anyways, here's that message. That was it. A simple invitation to come and do a one-on-one battle. But that match was the single most life-changing moment of my life. That's when Janky and I really started to get to know each other. After that match, we started talking to each other a lot. Nearly every minute of every day we'd talk. And if we weren't talking in a text chat, we plugged in our microphones and stood back to back as we fought off our enemies in whatever game came our way. In such a short amount of time, I really connected with him. I connected with him on a level that he was like my brother, man. He became my absolute best friend that I, and still to this very day, have ever had. This video game about shooting people gave me the best friend I could have only dreamed of. But in terms of best pals, the list doesn't end there when it came to people I met on the PlayStation. Oh no, we got a lot more to cover. February 2011. The rumors now proven, the promised day had come at last. Little Big Planet 2 was released and I went absolutely nuts! Remember that banana robot car you made? Forget that garbage! Now you can make a super robot rocket car that shoots laser bananas, can fly, turn to a submarine, all slowly cooking turkey for Thanksgiving dinner, and make a movie out of it! Yeah. That's the key part of Little Big Planet 2. The ability to make movies. The idea of making films was awesome to me. I wanted to get right into it. It was hard seeing that there's all these new tools I had no flippin' clue what they were supposed to do. But before I actually made a movie, I needed an idea. I looked through my collection of costumes looking for inspiration. And lo and behold, it was none other than the Cyclops costume from all those years ago. He was perfect. Thus, I created The Adventures of Cyclops, a tale of a Cyclops' quest to be accepted into society and defeat the evil alien skeleton Ajax. I published the first episode of the series and called it quits for the day. I felt pretty darn accomplished. The next day, I booted up my PlayStation, go to pop in Little Big Planet 2. But before I did that, I noticed I received a message. I went into my message box and saw a friend request. About 5 of them, along with tons and tons of messages. What the heck is going on? I thought to myself. They were all talking about the movie I made, and they wanted to add me as a friend. I thought, wow, these guys must have really liked it. I had no idea. I stood there in my pod in the game, and sitting on the couch in real life, completely dumbfounded. That little 30-second episode of the Cyclops running to the right and other people running away from him, ending with a giant exploding monkey? Well, it seems it got people's attention. About 2,000 to 3,000 individual people played it. Comments and reviews saying how awesome it was, asking me how I make movies and if I could teach them, and begging for more episodes. I make the second episode, and in no time it gets upwards near 5,000 plays. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Being one of the first people to figure out how to make movies, I became an overnight celebrity. And let me tell you, I love that people actually like what I was making, but don't let anyone fool you. Fame is the worst thing to ever exist. It sucks. Hard. Every day, 10 to 20 friend requests, messages and messages. It was getting out of hand. As time went on, interest in the Cyclops series dwindled, and I just became another one of those guys. And you know what? That's just the way I like it. But one message I got early on stood out to me. It was from a guy named Turbo Egg Salad. He was like, hey, I remember playing your levels in Little Big Planet 1. They talked about how much he loved Cyclops and all that good stuff. I thought he was an awesome guy, so I sent him a friend request. After we talked for a while, we agreed that I'd be his movie mentor and teach him the film business. I didn't really know who this guy was, so I checked his profile on the game. God, I thought I was famous. This guy had thousands upon thousands of plays across all the things he'd published. People gave his levels hearts up the wazoo. And this guy, super popular and among the best of the best in the game, liked my little dinky movie, wanted me to teach him how to make them, and be my pal. That blew my mind right out of the water. And through my friendship with Turbo, I met another interesting character. Me, Turbo, and some other fella, I forget who, were gaffing about in create mode, making a fun time living room scene for no apparent reason, when a friend of Turbo asked to join. That guy's name was Baker2582, but let's call him Baker. Now, this guy was nuts. Not nuts in the sense that he's insane in the membrane, but the kinds of things he built. He pulled out this huge spider mecha robot thing that dropped landmines and stuff. I was like, whoa, dude! And my socks were halfway across the room at that point. But despite my enthusiasm, I was thinking to myself, this guy's kind of a show-off. So I wasn't exactly welcoming of him at first. But the more we started playing together, the more I slowly warmed up to him. We had a bonding moment when we both reveled in the fact that we both thought his friend MC was a big loser. As time went on, I started to learn a lot more about this fellow. Baker, full name Thomas Baker, lives in the United Kingdom. He's actually 2 years older than I am, which isn't the first time something like this has happened. Turbo's in his 20s. It became increasingly interesting having conversations with him, mostly because it got frustrating whenever he called me out for calling crisps chips, or that time we spent like half an hour complaining about how he pronounced aluminum, though at the end we discovered that they spelled it different ways, so it's pronounced aluminium, which is just stupid. He's also a fan of pretty much every fandom that I hate, but I learned to tolerate him because he's my pal. That's one important thing I learned while being his friend: toleration. Baker's a great friend and all, but if he isn't the most stubborn person I've ever met in my life, then no one is. He's had so many problems with his friends, my friends, just about anyone that I've been tempted to cut the friendship off several times. But I always sighed, gritted my teeth, and put his feelings before mine and let those things slide. And for that, I guess I'd have to thank him. It's taught me to be a bit more forgiving and lenient of people, because I'm sure I'd meet people who will really push my buttons. Baker's become one of my best friends, actually. He transformed quite a few aspects of my life, especially with storytelling. He had the idea to combine his story, Arcania, and the Adventures of Cyclops into one super story. And gosh dang, it was a good idea. We basically rewrote everything about Cyclops and turned it into this epic tale filled with magic and gods and all sorts of jabba jabba. And not to mention experiencing Toast, a bit of an adventure thing we, Baker, myself, and a pal of ours named Kibbles, created. We'd act it out in Little Big Planet and make stuff up on the spot to advance the story. It's been going on for a whole 2 years now. I like to think me and him were friends that both of us needed. Baker often had trouble coping with his emotions because he's had a pretty rough life so far. He didn't really have anyone who he could sit down and talk with who'd really try to understand what he's going through. That's what I wanted to do for him. Sometimes I can get pretty angry with him when it's kind of his fault he's in the position he's in. Baker likes to call it Plum's curb stomping of kindness. But I've never had anyone open up so much to me as Baker did. He's told me things he said he's never told anyone before, even members in his family. And you know, I'm really, really glad I could. If there's one thing I hate, it's when my friends have all these bad emotions bottled up inside. I'm willing to be a shoulder for people to cry on, if it means I can help them cope with things they thought they never could. Fact of the matter is, I probably owe a large majority of my artistic and social skills to the fact that I sat inside and played video games all day. People always complain that children aren't developing any social skills because they don't go outside for riding up the bikes and jumping up the rope and blah 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 blah. But they don't really consider everything. Sure, a child's life shouldn't revolve around video games, but that doesn't mean they have to be avoided altogether. I've met people that connected with me on a level that I couldn't even imagine. People like the friends I've made almost feel unreal to me, especially since they're people I met in a video game. These are friends that I want to keep throughout my life and wouldn't give them up for anything or anyone. But I've been rambling on about video games for a while now, so let's talk about real life for a bit. Back in the mediocre existence that is my real life, my 9th grade year was coming to a close. But in a shocking twist of fate, it was decision time yet again. I had to either go to Stevenson High School, where they offered yet another program for those with special needs, or Utica High School, the school Jeremy went to. Everyone's initial thought was that because I took the special education in middle school, I liked to continue that. But after some long thought, I decided, hey, you know what? I can handle this. I can handle normal education. So I would take my leave, yet again leaving behind so many of the friends that I spent 3 years getting acquainted with. And you know what? It may very well have been the best choice I've ever made. Utica High School was the knees of the bees right from the get-go. I loved everything about it. I already had some people I knew from Jeremy there, so making friends wasn't an issue. I got introduced to so many new things I wasn't able to do at Davis. I took competitive speech, learned to make web pages, and actually really enjoyed learning for the first time. I also slowly got more into drawing again, having not drawn much as middle school went on. I never drew much in a serious manner, usually just doodles on my math papers, but still drawings nonetheless. But all this drawing reminded me of something. I still never did Hot Dog and Soap 3. Nothing was holding me back, so I finally decided that I was going to do it. I was going to finish Hot Dog and Soap once and for all. Over the course of the year, I got about 4 to 5 pages in. Yeah, it really ain't that much. At that point, I kinda gave up on it for the time being. A stupid little stick figure comic was too daunting of a task for this little man to handle. That didn't really change the whole drawing aspect though. In fact, I think I tried to fill the void in my heart by doodling. Come junior year, there may not have been a single paper that I didn't doodle on. They were mostly just little faces and stick figures and bodily positions that human beings would be incapable of, but they were there. I never really tried anything groundbreaking, but one day in government, I decided to doodle on my final exam review. And it actually looked pretty dang good. An actual full body drawing. The weird thing about it was that I've been drawing nothing but stick figures up until that point. I didn't practice bodies or any kind of proportions. It's like I just flipped a switch in my head and said, okay, I'm gonna draw better now, and I did. Both Jeremy and my mother were just completely baffled like I was. Eventually, I redrew it, colored it on my 3DS, and made it look all pretty, and came out with this. Yeah! And at that point, I thought about something. I can draw like this now, and Hot Dog and Soap 3 has hardly started, so why not draw it better? Hey, yeah, alright. And while I'm at it, I'll redraw Hot Dog and Soap 1 and 2. It was going to be a long and hard road, but it was one I was determined to travel. But only after getting one page into Hot Dog and Soap 3, I realized something. Wow, this story sucks. I had to admit, the plot of Hot Dog and Soap was almost completely non-existent, and whatever bits of plot were in there, it was complete garbage with as many plot holes as Michigan has potholes. I didn't want to have to redraw the first two just to be unhappy with it, so I threw out basically any trace of plot in Hot Dog and Soap and started from scratch, over and over again. I dare say the main plot of Hot Dog and Soap has been overhauled about 4 to 5 times so far. I finally managed to get all the major plot points down now that I think about it only a few months ago. But I was finally satisfied with the story, and it's just about the best thing I've ever thought of in my entire life. I turned this dumb little comic about a hot dog and a bar of soap into the most complex, plot-heavy, dark, and emotional piece of hoo-ha that I never dreamed could possibly exist. I owe a lot of that to Jeremy, who sat with me the whole way. We always collaborate when it comes to our projects. In fact, he's remaking an old comic of his as well, which was a lot of the inspiration that made me strive to transform Hot Dog and Soap. As of the time of writing this script of mine, I've gotten 135 pages into writing out the entire story. Even though now that I'm actually recording the lines, I'm actually about 150 pages in, but I've got thousands upon thousands more to go. It's the largest project I've ever, and probably will ever do. I've given up on a lot of projects and things like Little Big Planet, but Hot Dog and Soap holds a special place in my heart. If it dies, then it'll be when I die with it. I have big plans for Hot Dog and Soap, and I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Especially visually, because since that last drawing I just showed, I've actually gotten even better at this whole drawing shtick. It blows my mind to think that in just about 3 years I've gone from this to this, and right now I'm about this. And not only that, Hot Dog and Soap isn't going to be a simple panel-by-panel comic anymore. It's not become my dream, but my goal to turn Hot Dog and Soap into an animated cartoon. Though that means it's going to take that much longer to be shown to the world, that doesn't deter me one bit when I think about how stupendously spectacular it'll be. And with that, I'm really caught up to date on my life. Hot Dog and Soap is continuing to chug along, I'm sluggishly pushing my way through senior year, I've got great friends, and I'm perfectly darn content with life. But let's not forget the whole focus of this project, leadership. What exactly does all that malarkey that I just spit out you have to do with leadership? All the constant moving around and changing of environments got really close to breaking me a few times. But I learned to stare that fear in the face, adapt to new situations, and keep on powering through before I let the loss of friends bring me down. I've learned to manage big projects like Hot Dog and Soap, how to counsel people when they're feeling down, and help teach people around the world how to let their creativity flow. Leaders aren't born, they're made. And all that malarkey, as I called it, that was the story of my life. The life that made me the leader I am today. Man, this is really the first time I thought about my whole life like this. It was pretty fun talking with my pals and brohams to remind ourselves of those quintessential moments. This was a pretty neat experience for me, and I'm glad that I got to share it with all of you. Thank you all so much for your time. But, before I close this, I'd like to leave you with some words I heard in my life that really changed me as an individual. They don't say it be like it is, but it do. What does that mean exactly? Well, I don't know. Okay, bye!